Hey everyone, Nam here. Uh, Over the past weekend, the wrestling community we lost a very special talent, someone who contributed a lot to the business and for the fans. Uh, Obviously, that was Bobby the Brain Heenan. Uh, and obviously, people sent their condolences, fans, wrestlers, people in the business alike, all shared memories. Um, so I decided, Bobby Heenan did play an impact on me for as a wrestling fan, whether I know it or not. My first memories of him obviously was in WCW because that's around the time when I started following wrestling because of I was about 9, 10, and that was when the Monday Night Wars were going on. He was a broadcast announcer for them. Uh, Believe it or not, one of the first memories. I mean, I'm gonna go down the list of everything because I eventually, saw old VHS tapes with WWF at the time when it was called that. And shared my memories there, and especially looking at just old videos on YouTube and segments where he was just hilarious. Bobby Heenan was a master at using quick wit. I think he had very good command of the English language. He was well spoken, articulate. Um, just an all-around talent. He was born to be an entertainer because they even threw out, and I agree with it 100%, that if he wasn't in the wrestling business, he would somehow, some way be doing something in the entertainment business, whether it be writing, producing, acting, being a stand-up comedian. He was just quick on his feet. That was what I loved about Bobby Heenan, too, with his one-line zingers, too. We're going to get to that, but like my first memories of him, obviously, and it probably wasn't his favorite days, but it's my first early memories of him being on the announce team for WCW. And it was probably mostly during the Goldberg streak. I think this is probably because people argue, oh, Goldberg's kind of overrated, and he was just the right place, the right guy, right place, right time. And you could probably make that argument, but Goldberg was an athlete. He did have brute raw strength and power, and that was something that Bobby Heenan made note of, and he put it over Goldberg. I mean, like, for example, when he had a match with the Giant, he just picked up a body slam. He was like, "That is strength, that is power, that's the man." Yeah, that was Bobby Heenan. And then there was another time when he put him in the jackhammer. Uh, Bobby Heenan was like, "Now can he pick him up?" And then he kind of answers his own question, and he's like, "Nobody can. I'll bet the house on it." And, when he does, he's like, "Oh my God!" I mean, that was how Bobby Heenan put over talent like crazy, and I think he helped put over Goldberg in a way. Essentially, you can make that argument too. I mean, like Goldberg, I mean, he wasn't the best wrestling technician, but he was a brutal monster. Stone Cold Steve Austin was built. He said he was built like a shit brick house. That's a direct quote from Stone Cold Steve Austin. And Bobby Heenan let you knew that. And Bobby Heenan, I think, was impressed with the fact, with Goldberg, with being in the business not that long of a time, was able to kind of, still, I mean, even though he wasn't putting on long matches, he was still able to grasp and understand the concept and put on a decent showing. So, like I said, those are my early memories of Bobby Heenan, my first ones, I should say. Then, I started, like, where as a kid, there was this movie store, and it had old VHS tapes of old WrestleMania, SummerSlams, King of the Ring, Survivor Series. Speaking of Survivor Series, let's go to the 1993 Survivor Series. Oh my gosh, the match between the Hart family and Shawn Michaels and those knights, the Blue Knight, the Black Knight, and everything. Constant one-line zinger after zinger, one after another. Now, one was, now, isn't 20, this is Bobby Heenan quotes, now, once you classify 20 members of the Hart family living together as a ghetto, and then like, Vince McMahon made a comment, oh, right behind us, because they were sitting right behind him, the Hart family, good-looking family, and then Bobby Heenan just starts cracking up, laughing, and going, good-looking, he goes, good-looking family, looks like a bunch of crime suckers, and then he made, Stu Hart had a, Boston Bruins jacket on, and they panned to the camera panned to the back of Stu Hart, and then Bobby Heenan's like, "Oh, he's got a picture of Helen on the back of his jacket. Isn't that nice?" I mean, just constant riff and I mean, one line right after another. It was just hilarious. I just loved Bobby Heenan. It was just the guy. Just it was amazing. I just loved his sense of humor so quick. And you loved it and you loved to hate him because he was a heel manager, but he was brilliant. Uh, oh man, there was especially during the going a few months prior to that, and I'm talking about SummerSlam '93. The whole Lex Luger and Yokozuna thing, where they said Lex Luger body slam, which you can tell Yokozuna helped him with that. But I mean, it was also funny, like because Heenan kept yelling, "It was a hip block, hip block, hip block." Trying to say it was not a body slam, which it wasn't. Uh, and then I watched old segments on YouTube eventually when people started uploading. Uh, there was one also instance I was watching an old Battle Royal match, and the guy was explaining the rules. You are eliminated once you're thrown over the top rope, and then Bobby Heenan just quickly throws that. We know that, you dummy. I mean, if anyone else said that, it would just be like, whatever. But just Bobby Heenan, he just had something to him. Also, uh, there was it was primetime wrestling, or I don't know if it was primetime wrestling, but it was something. He asked this guy, "How long have you been married, sir?" He goes, 21 years. And then he said to her, if you had killed your wife, the night of your honeymoon, you would have been out by now, or the night of your wedding, you'd been out by now. Oh my God, that was hilarious. Uh, because of 20 years, it'd probably be the sentence or whatever. That was it was just amazing. And then the '92 Royal Rumble, I believe it was, when Ric Flair won. He was like being Ric Flair's uh what was it? It was like an advocate. It was a financial advisor, but he was also managing him, and he was asked to manage him too. But I guess knowing Ric Flair, his way of living on the road can be crazy, and Bobby Heenan said, "I just can't do this." But he kept yelling during the whole because Ric Flair drew number 3, and he's like, "That's not fair to Flair. That's not fair to Flair." And then uh, lo and behold, Flair won, and Mr. Perfect and Bobby Heenan say, "We're not the type of people to say we told you so, but we told you so." I think that was on Primetime Wrestling when they were with, where they had that segment where they just talked with 2 other panelists along with Vince McMahon. Uh, I'm trying to think of other special memories because Bobby Heenan was a true gift to the wrestling business. I mean, oh, how can I forget? Because like about a year or so ago, I found out when he didn't really announce the match. It was Hacksaw Jim Duggan. He was announcing with Tony Schiavone, and then Schiavone made the mention about Duggan's background being a college guy, played football, and it made uh, Heenan just bust up laughing at the thought of Hacksaw Jim Duggan going to school for an education because Hacksaw Jim Duggan he played that kind of a seemed like a guy with a loose screw, good-hearted, but goofy. And then anyway, during the whole match, Bobby Heenan's just cracking up anytime when Schiavone's making observations and talking about Jim Duggan in any positive light, and Bobby Heenan's just busted up laughing. And that was just that's the kind of talent. Anyone else probably couldn't do that. Bobby Heenan could. What was another thing that something I just had a thought. I hate that when in my train of thought I think about something and then it kind of goes away. But Bobby, I mean, great talent, especially with his his chemistry with the Gorilla Monsoon, who were real life best friends. You could tell that they were they were the best announced team of all time, I believe. They just gelled so well together, and uh, the story was they had the storyline because Bobby Heenan in real life didn't want to take a 50% pay cut or something as much as that for the WWF, and in the storyline they had it where and this is Bobby Heenan wanted it that way because I guess and it was also fitting, but he wanted Gorilla Monsoon to throw him out of the building. That's what essentially he did. But I read a story also that after the show ended, Raw, that they went into a hotel and they just embraced each other and cried because that was they weren't going to be working together anymore and then Bobby Heenan, he was thinking about retirement, but because he wanted to be with his family, especially with his daughter. But then WCW offered a lighter schedule. He'd be around his daughter more. That's why, and those weren't his favorite years being in WCW because I think it was Solomon Monster. I listen to his podcast sometimes or segments of it, and supposedly Bobby Heenan also made suggestions about maybe storylines or creative decisions, and Eric Bischoff said, "No, we're paying you just to announce. We don't need your help doing any of behind the scenes work." More or less what he said, and Bobby Heenan, it kind of was hard for him. I can understand why, because he was a genius. That's why they called him the Brain. I mean, he put over any time. I mean, like the likes of, Andre the Giant is probably arguably one of the most famous wrestlers of all time. And he managed wrestlers like Big John Studd, Hercules Hernandez, the Barbarian. He also, when Andre the Giant tag team, I think it was Haku or something, or I believe that's what it was. And I remember after that face turn for Andre the Giant. This is at the tail end of his career, right after when Andre grabbed him, and then backstage, Bobby Heenan had the interview with Mean Gene Okerlund, and the famous line he said, "You listen to me, you go straight to the top. You don't listen to me, you're never heard from again." Also, this is about 9 years ago when I found out he had a few episodes called the Bobby Heenan Show. Now, I wish that would have went on longer than just 3 or 4 episodes that it had gone. He had that sidekick, Jameson Winger, who we'd always constantly put down. Like Jameson Winger extended his hand out for a handshake, and then Bobby Heenan's like, "No, the health department won't allow me to do that." uh, and yeah, he had these, you know how a game show hosts have beautiful petite women bring out guests or something, or it's like you look at that's he mocked it, and it was heavyset women that would bring out the guests, and he called them his oinkettes. And uh, the one he asked in the first episode, he goes, "So what kind of activities do you have?" And he's like, she said, "I like to play softball." And he's like, they're hard to get down, aren't they?" basically calling her fat, and saying how she basically, they like to eat. And one of the guests that came on the show was a stripper. Even though she was 84 years old, she wore these like early 1900 clothes, and that's where. And then he's like, "How old are you?" And she's like, "I'm 84." He goes, "Oh my god," I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, "Oh my gosh, you look good. I would have guessed 81, 82. And that reminds me also, another zinger he had with the Hart family, Helen Hart. He's like, her face could hold a 8-day reign with all those wrinkles. And then another one was Stu Hart and Helen Hart are going to remake the movie Sleepless in Seattle. They're going to meet eye to eye over a bowl of prunes and call it Senile in Seattle. I mean, that's just what Bobby Heenan. I mean, it was great just to listen and get my hands on anything I could listen to, and it was just funny. And his feud with Hulk Hogan, he always wanted to kill Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania, and kill it off, but to no avail, because he'd send challenger after him, and ultimately Hulk Hogan would prevail. But Bobby the Brain Heenan would always send out a new challenger for him. But that's also interesting because they kind of reversed roles, obviously. I mean, Hogan started out as face into WCW, but then became a heel when he was in the NWO. And it's like Bobby Heenan, he was probably a tweener is what they call it. He was not really much of a face or a heel, but he was just calling down the middle. But also, again, with putting Goldberg over during the match with Hogan, that when Goldberg won the streak. And, after he speared him, he's like, "Oh, there's part 1 now. Finish him off. Finish him off. Your career's on the line here. Do it. Do it." And he's like, "This place will rip," when he picks him up. And then after he got the pinfall, he's like, "Oh, thank you. thank you. We got a new heavyweight champion of the world, the first undefeated man in this sport. I mean, that's just and like that was even though Bobby Heenan during that time was not as happy as professionally because of them not letting him have any say in any of the creative decisions. He still showed up to work and did his job, and uh, he still loves his fans because he would turn around and people would chant "Weasel, Weasel" because his old during those old days when he would be a manager, he would like do dirty tricks when the ref wasn't looking and like choke like the opponent that his one of his wrestlers was managing, or maybe do a cheap shot with the hit. Bobby Heenan played his role really well. It just in the just an all around great talent that was truly a one of a kind. I don't think I do him justice to say how great he was. But as a fan, though, I hope I do my best. It really was a shame that later on in his life where you could see what the health effects he had after he had his throat cancer. He lost a considerable amount of weight, and his voice was kind of a little more hoarse, especially his 2004 Hall of Fame speech. But he didn't look bad, but I mean, you can tell there was a difference. The cancer and then the radiation. Uh, that obviously had an effect on him. And then the years that he had to keep getting his jaw rewired because it would get infected. And then it just became sad later on, like after like 2008, 2009, when he slowly, is just declining in health. I mean, his face was like sunken in, and it was just sad to see him in that state uh, of health. But his mind was still sharp, and that's a blessing. So he didn't. I don't think he suffered too bad, but it took its toll on his body, and he obviously couldn't talk that much as the all the surgeries, and I also saw that he had like broke his hips one time trying to get out of bed. This was like a year or so ago because before he was trying to attend his wedding. So I mean it was kind of in. I had thought even probably around that time, I was like, I wonder if Bobby Heenan is going to be if his time's coming, and sure enough, it was sooner rather than later, unfortunately. But those are my memories of Bobby Heenan. And I know I have many more. I just can't think of. I always YouTube searched any Bobby Heenan segments because I knew I'd get. Oh, and especially. And then here's another one that just popped in my mind. Him and Vince McMahon, they were talking about Bastion Booger, and I don't know if it was about a battle royale, but it was some type of match. And he goes, "Booger's my pick," and then Vince McMahon's like, "I beg your pardon." He's like, "I picked Bastion Booger. Booger's my pick," and then. And then, like Bobby Heenan's just sitting there, like he made it like it wasn't a joke, but obviously that was the whole shtick. It was just to be a wise ass, and then Vince McMahon's like, "This is a famous, and then Bobby goes, "I know," and then like Vince McMahon reiterates it basically, and he goes, "I know," and then he waved to the camera just nonchalantly, like there was no, like there was nothing, you know, uh, no big deal about it, even though the joke was, picking your nose, Booger was my pick. That was the one, I just found that one out a few years ago. By God, like I said, anything Bobby Heenan did, it just turned to gold. So rest in peace to Bobby Heenan. Uh, Thank you for all the memories that you've given us, and that I know I'll treasure as a wrestling fan. No one will ever replace you, or there will never be another Bobby Heenan. So with that said, as always, I'm Nam, and always use your noodle. And by the way, if you see this video, please feel free to share your favorite Bobby Heenan moments and even your first memories of Bobby Heenan. I'd love to talk and share memories with Heenan because he was just that. He was a special talent, and he was someone I truly was entertained by. And I'm thankful that I got to watch some of the videos and had the opportunity to see old VHS tapes, and YouTube was able to provide some material as well when people uploaded videos and segments of him, especially with Gorilla Monsoon. So again, like with that said, as always, I'm Nam, and always use your noodle.